It's triggered usually by an infection, bacterial or viral, but there's also people who will have ME come on after intense trauma. Some people just develop it and there's no real clear, onset point. Mine came from infection with E. coli.
Oh,
When
wow.
I was 15, I was in the hospital for nearly a week. And yeah, came out and kind of just knew I wasn't better. I wasn't better for a long, long time. I mean, it's months and months and months, sometimes even years for some people to get a diagnosis. Um, but it's one of those conditions that is quite hard. It's a very kind of unique experience, I think. Fatigue is obviously a huge part of it, but there's also a lot of pain, brain fog, problems with sleeping. And there's this thing that we call PEM. So it's like post exertional malaise, which basically refers to when you have ME/CFS, like your general activities, it's like they take so much more from you than they used to or they do other people. So, before I got ill, I was like, I played football, I did cross country.
Yeah.
When I was bad, I couldn't go out of my house. I couldn't, seeing friends would just completely mean that for days afterwards I'd be resting. Like it's really kind of extreme, the bodily reaction that you get.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. One of my friends, they had ME, but I didn't realize that. I mean, I'm just guessing. I'm guessing it affects every person different, but I didn't realize it that could affect people to that extent with all the different side effects. Wow.
Mhm.
So, could you describe when you were first diagnosed and the process of how you got diagnosed? Like, have you always had the diagnosis, or is it a recent one?
So after coming out of the hospital, I tried to kind of go back to my life as it was before, but I was definitely like I couldn't do any of my sport. I was really struggling to get to school. Even I found it so
Yeah.
hard to walk, to do anything, and um, I think it was more just persistence on my parents' part of taking me back to the GP. We had blood test after blood
Yeah.
test. ME is very much you have to rule everything else out. And there's no one test for ME, although they are
Okay.
researching ways to test for it. So there's a promising kind of blood test that's being developed, but it's not like readily
Not there
available
yet.
yet. Um, so yeah, it's more just, it was ruling out everything else. Did I have MS? Was I low in certain nutrients, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. Um, and it came to because I was still under 16 at the time, I got referred to a pediatric service. So I think I
Yeah.
was almost lucky in that respect because when it's children or young
Yeah.
adults, we tend to care a
Expedited.
bit
Yeah.
more. Yeah, expedited. So yeah, I was lucky in that respect and also I was living in Bristol at the time, and Bristol has quite a good CFSME
Yeah.
service. So I think my diagnosis came maybe like 9 months after the onset. So I can't remember if I turned 16 by that point,
Yeah.
but essentially, it's been over a decade that I've um, lived with knowing what causes me to have, and it's a very fluctuating. Like, so when I was in school, I would often use a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Um, because I wouldn't like the energy that the classes took. If I spent that energy trying to get to class, I wouldn't have any left
No
when I
energy.
got there.
Yeah.
But it is very fluctuating. Like afterwards, then I was able to drive and I was able to go to uni, and then I relapsed again. And it's all very, it's kind of not like a progressive in the sense that
Yeah.
you're just going to stay the same or get worse.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Sounds very varied.
Mhm.
Like it's good in a way. It is good, like you said, that they picked it up when you were a child, because then and like we got referred to pediatrics, because then you're not sort of left wondering like, why am I like this? And at least
Mhm.
you've had like time to sort of come to terms with it and then sort of adapt, rather than I know like, autism for example is like I'm lucky I was diagnosed with autism at 2, but I've got friends and know people that they're still waiting for a diagnosis, even though to me, like as, I'm not a medical professional, but as someone who's autistic, that I can easily like pick out traits that and like a lot of different traits uh, where they're most likely autistic. Found I mean. I'm just generalizing. I've got dyspraxia as well. I'm not saying I have ME or anything like that, but it sounds like that it's sort of there's some similarities, but with ME, it's more extreme, and like it does affect you, like whether like dyspraxia doesn't affect you mobility wise, but like to an extent where you have to use a wheelchair, but it does mean sort of some activities are more draining compared to someone who doesn't have a disability or things like that. It's really
Mm.
fascinating to me.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things almost about being part of like the disabled community is that you
Yeah,
do get those like I speak to people who have POTS or who have,
yeah,
or ADHD, and like they'll mirror the symptoms that I've got. And it's just great, even though I know it's not, the same
yeah,
condition, but to talk to people about how they're feeling and know that like I'm not the only one with this problem. Um, yeah, and like fatigue as well, I think is one that everybody has their own
yeah.
kind of experience of it. And it's one of those ones that I don't think it's really talked about that
No,
much
not at
because
all. No,
you can't take a pill to get rid of it like you
no.
can with a headache or whatever. It's just something we think we have to grin
We
and
have to live.
bear. And
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree. Like it's so lovely. Like I've been doing the podcast 3 years now, and I've met it. Help doing it helps me came to terms like be more comfortable talking about my disability, but that and also that feeling of loneliness because
Mm-hmm.
it, it's very unlikely like you're going to grow up like with people with disabilities and like unless you go out and find them and join communities and talk about it, it can be a lonely place, but yeah, it totally helps talking about it. And especially like you said with like tiredness and fatigue, sorry, people just write that off as like, oh, she's just tired. Sometimes some people might have the view that it's laziness when it's not at all. Like there's no cure for it, there's nothing like you can do about it or other people with similar disabilities can do with fatigue. Like we have to sort of adapt, and people need to be people and employers, like this just my opinion, like need to be more accommodating to that.
There's a lot of stigma, I think, around like when you kind of almost in air quotes let your
Yeah,
disability get the better. It's like there's loads of people have these like opinions, and usually they're able-bodied
yeah,
people who don't have any kind
absolutely.
of condition. And you think actually it's okay to acknowledge that like this is stopping me from doing these
Yeah,
things, and I have to restructure my life in response to how my body feels
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. It's like it's just knowing that like sometimes like you need to sort of learn like not to keep pushing against it, like forcing yourself. Sometimes you need to, and it can be very hard. I know I've struggled with it, like allowing yourself time just to rest and just to accept the fact that although it's frustrating because you reached a point where okay, I'm never going to be able to do this. Like with me and dyspraxia, it's like things like tying shoelaces and riding a bike, things that people take for granted. But I know I'm never going to be able to do that. It's frustrating, but I've accepted it.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your reactions, if you can remember, like that far back, and your family's reaction to when you first got diagnosed?
It was very hard. Like I say, being, someone who almost like used all their energy day to day, did loads of things, to then go to not, not even have the energy to go and see friends and stuff like that. I think it took a while for me to kind of come to terms with that. My family, like, I think it's a hard one to see as well. Like when as a parent, you
Yeah,
see your child change so dramatically and not really understanding why. Like there's no clear answers to why I had it, apart from oh dear, she had an infection, didn't really get better.
yeah,
Um, it's very difficult, and there is a lot of that stigma around what you should and shouldn't do. Like, should you push yourself? Should you try and
yeah,
and like I was a teenager, so my mom was like, "Well, teenagers are lazy. Maybe I just need to like, try and get her to get out of bed a bit more
yeah.
and stuff
Do
like
stuff.
that." It must have been so difficult for them to not know what was going on, I guess. And actually, so there was when I was diagnosed, there were certain recommendations for treatment or like therapies that
Yeah.
now are no longer recommended in the UK.
Okay.
So I did something called graded exercise therapy, which is with a physiotherapist, and it's very much like, okay, these are the
Yeah.
exercises you're going to do, and you have to do them, even if you don't want to do them, even if you're in pain. Like you have to do them,
Wow.
and gradually we'll build up and up and up, and then
Yeah.
you'll be fighting fit again.
Yeah.
And now we know. So there's a flawed study that happened around 2011, which is rough. When did I get? Was it 2011? I got diagnosed. Yeah, it would have been. Maybe it was the year before.
Yeah.
So that study basically was looking at this exercise therapy in comparison to other treatment options and therapies,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of conflicting stuff that came out. It's been a big, huge thing, which I could talk about for absolute ages. I guess you could call it a special interest. But like, now we know that when we look at studies, the evidence is not there for that kind
Yeah.
of treatment. A lot of people claim that say they were made worse, that their symptoms were worsened. I certainly was worsened by the graded exercise
Yeah.
therapy that I did. And it really, I think it probably hindered rather than getting me to improve,
Yeah.
it definitely
But the
hindered my
opposite.
improvement. Yeah. But I mean, people thought they were doing what was right. And obviously, my mom was very much like, Mom, we need to do all this stuff. So I think when it got to the point where I had a bit more autonomy and could listen to my body and react in the way that I knew I had to, that's when things started improving, and when I started actually listening to what was going on and making those decisions for myself, I think was
Yeah.
the point at which I started to feel like I had control. Because the feeling of being out of control and your body doing all these things that you don't understand, that in itself is something you have to really come to terms with. And to be 15
Yeah.
and
And
be
that must be
thinking like
hard.
that, it was. But I think it's funny. I was listening to one of your podcast episodes the other day. I think it was
Okay.
with Ellie.
Yeah.
And she was talking about like, understanding, knowing, having been diagnosed with autism when she was really young,
Yeah.
meant that she kind of told her friends as she was growing up, but then she decided to keep it from some of them and stuff like that. And I kind of think I was lucky that that I had a friendship group and then I got ME, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
So you didn't have to go
Because,
for to find your
yeah,
friends. Yeah.
like trying to make friends, trying to be an adult and socialize and date with this condition is
Yeah.
really hard. And my friends, like, I mean, they pushed me around school in the wheelchair. They loved it. They liked getting to use the lift that nobody else could use.
Oh,
So like,
that's brilliant.
yeah, they were great support.
That's good that if kind of what could have been sort of like troubling time, especially being a teenager, it's not fun for anyone with or without a
Mhm.
disability. If you have a disability, it certainly makes life 10 times harder. But it's good that your friends were accepting and that they did turn it
Mhm.
into a positive experience for you and were there to be supportive. Um, on the flawed studies, I do relate to that a lot, especially with autism growing up. Obviously, I was too young to realize at the time, but growing up in the 90s, 2000s with autism, especially with the flawed studies around vaccines and like all the myths and yeah, it wasn't fun. Sort of like, but people were believing it. Like, still
Mhm.
sort of fighting today really to get people to change it, not change their mind, but sort of educate them in
Mhm.
like around the thinking, like even changing terminology. Like I've had to in previous workplaces, I've had to sort of speak to them when I've said seeing that when they tried to like autism is sort of a behavioral difficulty. It's not a difficulty, it's a neurological disorder. Sorry, again, that's what similar to you. That's one of my special interests. Like it just frustrates me.
Mhm.
But no, I'm just glad like that. Yeah, you had the supported time going up, which leads me nicely on to that next question. Now, did you have any challenges you faced at school with your disability? And did you get support? I know you said you had support from friends, but from sort of the school itself.
Yeah, so I mean, the school, I think because I'd before been like one of those kind of students that literally did everything for the school
Yeah,
teams, but also was like trying to strive for the right grades and stuff too. My school were very much like, we don't want you to go to waste, so we're not going to let this stop you.
yeah,
Obviously, kind of flawed in that respect, but
yeah,
I get it. And also, I'm thankful because, they encouraged me to lessen my timetable, but do the things
yeah.
I wanted to do and stuff like that. And there was I can't remember how I found it or who introduced me to it, but there's a association for young people with ME.
Okay,
And that was really, really useful. Like they do like a pen pal scheme. So I got to talk to someone who had my
that's really
condition.
lovely.
Yeah, it was one of those like, and they had like a forum back then that was
Yeah,
things, went on
good
there
old
and
forums.
chatting and
Yeah,
stuff. So like there I had sort of support from my own community.
yeah,
Obviously it's harder when, you know, around you everyone else is seemingly healthy
yeah.
and there were obviously challenges, and I think one of the biggest things for me was like I'd had these ideas and goals for how my life was going to go, and that it became apparent that they weren't
Mm.
good. My life wasn't going to go that way, kind of thing. So I think when I got ill first, I was hoping to study veterinary medicine. I really wanted to
Yeah.
be a vet. I was getting the right grades in science and everything, and I thought I could do it. And actually, as I still tried to do the A levels to get me there, and then I went to open days at universities in my wheelchair, and I'd like rock up, and we'd be in like a farm with a cobbled path, and
Yeah.
they'd look at
Oh
me and
no.
be like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And I did try for a long time.
Yeah.
Like I took a year out to try and do some
Yeah.
work experience and get there, but it just, even the lab things weren't, they were too high and stuff like that. So it
Oh,
was like,
awful.
and I mean, vets have such a long working hours, and I'd be on my feet.
Yeah.
Like everyone kept trying to tell me, you
Yeah.
can't do this. And for a long time, I didn't listen. And then eventually I had to go, you know what? It's, it's like, as you say, you're never going to be able to tie your shoelaces by
Yeah.
yourself. And I wasn't going to be able to go and be a vet. I could work with animals in a different way, or
Yeah.
I could, and obviously I went down the science route, but
Yeah.
like, that I think that was one of the hardest things at the beginning, was to acknowledge that like the life I'd sort of planned for myself wasn't going to be achievable anymore.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I think simple things like uni at having the right like accessible workbenches that could have been changed, but you're also now helping people in a different way, right? And like you've gone down the science route, so I'm a big believer. Sort of, my mum's drummed into me like everything happens for a reason. And I know it's hard, like I do like, um, but you're now in this place helping people like do it through a different route. And I will get your book and read it because it really fascinates me, and I think it's really amazing that you're not that you're using like your own experience to help other people. Like I'm a big champion of that. Sort of in a similar vein. Not in it is sort of, and I feel bad when I compare, but like for years and years I wanted to work in the TV industry, and this is going off on a tangent now. Uh, and so it essentially COVID made me go back to uni and study like my master's in TV production, and then I was lucky for 2 years after COVID. Just by chance, I kept like it's a very freelance industry, like similar to journalism. Just by chance, I managed to work in TV, and then like, I was so happy. Similar to that, like I was devastated. Fast forward 2 years, I'm now working at Bupa. I've worked in the ambulance service. I did that for a year. I'm now working at Bupa, so now I'm like in healthcare, like helping people. So I'm happy with that. So I had
Yeah,
a great
that's the
experience
main
in
thing.
TV, yeah, but
Oh, that's so
that's
shocking
really.
to hear, though.
I know, yeah, it was really sad because I was having a great time. I was working on CBBC and CBBC. I was having the best
Oh,
time in my
wow.
life working in kids' TV. But like those skills I gained from there has helped me like working in the
Mm.
ambulance service and to here. And like I'm still like friends with the people I work with. I still talk to them, and now I just work down the road, so it's perfect. I can still see them, but everything
Is it
happened.
like a closed door, or do you think at some point you might
Um,
go back? Or
I'd say I'd like if they offered me a permanent job, like especially in that department. I know it's sort of limiting my expectations there, but eh, then I would go back. However, but based on what I saw in the industry, like at the time, like the way it's moving, because I live in the northwest, they're moving a lot of things back down to London, even though they
Mhm.
made a big push to move everything like back to Manchester. A lot of things are moving back down to London. So the opportunities are limited, and it's becoming more. It was competitive at the time, but it's more and more competitive. So I think more likely it's a closed door. However, if they did offer me a permanent job, I would go back in an instant and job security.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean about that, like that barrier of just everything being in London.
Yeah,
Like with journalism, there's so many publications I'd love to work for, and you just
yeah,
think, the fact they want everyone in the office or whatever, it's just, it obviously freelance is great because you can work for a few
yeah,
different
brilliant.
places,
Yeah.
but it's also, there's a lot of challenges that come with that anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think now, like especially with journalism, I mean, I get sort of like with being, I was a runner, so obviously I have to be in the studio. But I think with journalism and like other freelancers, just you don't need to be in the office. You don't. COVID gave us the beauty of things like we're chatting now on Zoom and like
Mhm.
loads of other things. You don't need a physical office. It will save them money. It will save everybody else money.
Yeah, totally. The fact that we all managed to do it and still
Yeah,
produced everything we did shows that,
absolutely.
we can do that. And actually people, if it's obviously, I understand if some people find they prefer to be more
Yeah, that's
productive in the office, but if the people are okay to not do that, I feel
yeah,
like it should be an option to everyone.
completely agree. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent,
That
but
was a
just
nice
not give you a
tangent, wasn't
backstory. I do that.
it?
I'm under sort of like assessment for ADHD as well. So if I do go on tangent, that's why.
That makes
No,
sense.
so I'll bring it back now. So are there any differences between ME and CFS between women and men, or not? Is it sort of, are there notable differences?
So, as far as we know, more women than men tend to get it. Not
Okay.
too sure why that is. It could be because the part of your cell that makes energy. It's kind of not as
Yeah.
simple as that, but for argument's sake, is the mitochondria. And actually, we only get our mitochondria from our mothers.
Okay.
Um, so, I mean, that's like a fact that I've read somewhere else, and then I've also read mitochondrial research. Excuse me. I've also read mitochondrial research in MECFS, and so I'm like kind of piecing those two things together, going,
Yeah.
maybe this is something. But obviously, there's so much more to it, and men do get it, and it can
Yeah.
run in families and stuff like that. But there's a great study going on at the moment, and part of their early results have shown that they asked, I think, 17,000 people, and over 80% of the respondents who had MECFS were women.
Yeah.
Um, I do, and they also found that women tend to report more symptoms. But and I wonder whether actually perhaps in males it's being underdiagnosed. Like it's really hard
Yeah.
to know what's actually going on there. Um, I do think that women generally who are disabled face different struggles.
Yeah.
Like we know that women's problems can often be written off as like hysteria or just women, or like you'll feel tired
Yeah.
and that, oh, it's just
Awful.
because
Yeah.
it's time of the month or something, like, there's
Yeah.
some we do know there are ways that women end up being dismissed when it comes to trying to get a diagnosis. Um, it's kind of muddy waters, but it does look like that women tend to feel more symptoms and also have more likelihood of
Yeah.
getting it than men.
That's really interesting. Like it's the complete opposite for autism, where like more
Mm,
men are likely to have autism. I think mainly because of the flawed diagnosis tool that they use,
mm,
which is based on like a normal white male. But no, it's really interesting to see that it's this sounds like it's the opposite for women. That women are most likely to get it, and that wow,
mm.
that is interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I'm literally trying to. I've had an initial assessment for autism and it went so badly. I left in tears and I was like,
it's good
I
to
can't
hear
go through
that.
this again. But it is that sort of, I think any almost diagnostic tool, when it's used like to the letter,
Yeah,
it can be really hard to get across. And like, I think even, people's answers to questions like, I don't know, this is coming up with questions, but things like, in the last week, have you felt extremely tired on 3 or more days?
yeah,
Well, someone's category of what extremely tired is would be very different from someone
exactly true.
else's. So it's really hard to know, if I get it, if I've got it and someone else answers slightly differently, or maybe they think, oh, well, my tiredness is normal, so I'll just put this a
Yeah,
normal level. Um, there's so much that we probably are missing when it comes to diagnosis,
definitely.
both for autism and MECFS.
No, definitely. Yeah, you're right. It's all like, especially like with that, like it's all about perspective, like, and whoever's doing the assessment, like, their
Mm,
perspective as well, because you could be really tired, but that could be normal for you, and but it might not be normal for the assessment, and the opposite is true as well. So, you've written a book called Pace Yourself. Please can tell me, how did the idea for the book came about, and what is it about, and where can you get it?
So pace yourself kind of came about it was during the third lockdown I think we had in the UK.
Yeah,
And I mentioned that my illness is kind of fluctuating, and I had a really bad relapse right at the start of 2021. And I was worse than I'd been
yeah,
than even when I was diagnosed. Like I couldn't leave the flat. I couldn't. I was really quite ill, and I remember um, I found out, I think my mum gave me all the old stuff I'd had when I got diagnosed. Like she had this little folder and it was all from when I was like, 15.
Oh,
And I was looking through the leaflets and then I spoke to my GP about the relapse and he said, okay, I'll send you some leaflets over via email. And I got this email, and like the leaflets were exactly the same,
yeah,
and the advice on managing your energy was still only like 2 pages long, the same stuff it had been 10 years ago. And I just thought, how do we not have more information a decade later? Like, I knew I had to kind of go and find the stuff out there so that I could
yeah,
help myself because it didn't seem like anyone else was going to do that. Um, and I guess then, it wasn't like I had an idea for a book or anything. I just knew that I wanted to start collecting this
yeah.
information. And then I had friends who were really struggling during lockdown and family members and stuff saying like they were saying they had struggles that I was having and how did I manage this or how did I cope with being exhausted and I kind of started to think about how I could share what I was learning and being a writer I guess it's felt natural to do it in that
Yeah.
way. I did thankfully get to write a few pieces about like long COVID and stuff when I was writing for the magazine, but I kind of started to pull together all these ideas and thought, and I mean, it's always been a lifelong dream to write a book. I mean,
Yeah.
like that's one of those things that I read so much to see my name on a book would have been
Yeah.
incredible.
No,
So
amazing.
started kind of think of it, and I was very lucky in that I knew a few people through my job, and I got in touch with someone who's a literary agent. And I just said to her, like, I've got this idea. What do you think? Is it worth me pursuing? And we had a meeting, and she totally like saw what it could and how it could help people and what it could do. And then she was like, "Yeah, I want to represent you." It was
Oh, that's
just,
amazing.
oh my God. And then I had to actually start planning the thing. Um, and I think it took like a year and a half, nearly 2 years to get together what's called a proposal, which is
Yeah.
like an overview layout of the chapter structures, but all that sort of stuff. And then her and I would take that then to publishers. And yeah, it was amazing that a publisher actually went, I can see value in this. Like, that there's no other, there's a few other books out there on energy, but particularly
Yeah.
on like energy management when you're feeling exhausted. Like a lot of the advice that you get given when you feel overwhelmed is like just do more stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, you need to exercise more. Oh, you need to be socializing more. Oh, you should be doing this, this, and this. Or even like, oh, you need to take care of yourself more. You have to go and do some yoga
Yeah.
and you have to go.
So
And
generic.
even that stuff is like all more stress to add, or, oh, you have to eat better. And you think, well, I'm so tired. I can't even think of what I have to cook. I don't want to make this, like it's all, there's so much weight on us and to be able to put a book out that was like realistic about the limits that we have on our energy levels that told people how to notice their own feelings of energy, understand their own fatigue and where it was maybe coming from and what was contributing to it and all the stuff that I'd read and learned into something that hopefully it's not just for people with MECFS, although there are sort of sections where I talk about the specifics
Yeah.
of the condition because the advice kind of differs, but yeah, it was more like just for anyone that feels so exhausted, whatever the cause, we need to start thinking about our energy levels and taking like this depletion of
Yeah.
energy day in day out seriously. Um, so yeah, pace yourself. And then it came out in December, and it's been great. I've had some really lovely messages. I've
Yeah.
done some really great interviews. Like yeah, hopefully the book is doing what I set out to do, which is really nice.
No, it does sound absolutely incredible, and I will order it. It does sound brilliant. Like it sounds really interesting. Like I definitely will get it, and I'm sure it will be fantastic. And I'm sure you're helping a lot of people because there isn't that many resources like for specific like disabilities, like apart from generic sort of like medical information, which is usually written most of the time by somebody who doesn't even have the disability. To
Mm-mm.
have you share your experiences and like with the purpose of helping other people, like it's amazing. So I'll definitely take my hat off for you on that one.
Thank you. Yeah, that kind of idea that people who talk about this sort of thing don't always know. And even like, you read scientific research and it's all stuff that's been done in a lab under lab
Yeah,
conditions and really closely monitored. And it's like, well, how do you apply that to your life? Like, what does that actually mean day to day? I really wanted to kind of do something that was actually achievable by
yeah.
regular people.
Yeah, which is what people with disabilities need. They need like easy to follow advice that isn't done under lab conditions, because nobody lives in a lab.
Exactly.
We're not lab rats unless we're the Matrix, which I'm sure we're not.
Well, that was the theory, yeah.
I'm Please can tell me how your disabilities, if they had any impact or any friendships or relationships, if you had to make any adjustments to each other's behaviour to support the other with your disability. That doesn't make sense.
I think I know what you
Yeah.
mean. Yeah, I mean, so I've spoken a bit about like my friends at school and stuff, but I think coming out of school and going into, the real world, I did find it difficult to like I've always been one that I would much rather spend my energy on either education or like my career and stuff, probably to my own detriment, really, because I struggle with it as it is to like make friends anyway. So I think maybe that's part of it as well, that making friends just seemed really hard. So I just thought I'd rather be working. So I think it's taken me a while to kind of realize that I probably, even though it takes more energy to do that sort of thing,
Yeah.
I know that the mental health benefits of being with friends, and I know that like the support that they offer it outweighs that cost, I guess. But that's just something that I've had to kind of learn growing up, I guess. And I think with the relationships as well, like when I was diagnosed, I was in a relationship and then went out and then go into the whole world of dating. And when you've got like an energy limiting condition, I think it's kind of hard to navigate the dating landscape, shall we say, and like find people that really understand. Like I'm really lucky. So my husband's mum had ME, and so he kind of has an awareness of what it's like, and he's sort of always been able to support. We've kind of learnt together as to how best to support me, and what with it fluctuating and stuff. He's almost like he's the one. I mean, I call my book Pace Yourself, but he's the one that's always telling me, like, Amy, just pace, like, come on, you need to pace yourself now. Like, think about it. We're checking, have I had a rest yet? And stuff like that. It's quite funny though, because he's got ADHD, and I think like his like bundle of energy is just like, and sometimes I'm like, you just need to chill because you're exhausting me right now with how but also it's great because yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Like he's got this energy, so I could just like just go and amuse yourself, and he'll just, or like any tasks that I'm really struggling with, he can just kind of get on and do, and it's worked quite well so far, at least. Yeah, I think it's one of those, and it's not a conversation that I always have with like new friends and new people. I'm not always like upfront about saying it, but I guess now with the book being out, it's kind of like everybody knows it about me always. But it's been helpful, I think, and I think one of the good things is like, because it's such a generic, like it's more about energy and fatigue than it is about me. So everyone then starts sharing with me their experiences, and like there's so many people that I've known for a long time, or that have turned around and said, oh yeah, I've got this invisible condition that I live with and it affects me in these ways, and these are conversations that we probably wouldn't have had before. So it's been quite nice, actually.
Well, that sounds really lovely. Like dating wild, making friends are very difficult, like but it's so glad that you managed to find sort of like your husband, like, because his mum had ME, that he could relate to her experiences, and then like further support you with yours, and sort of help together to find sort of like I was going to say equilibrium. That's a equilibrium, like a balance of balances. So that's really nice. It's good. Like I said, opposites attract. Everything happens for a reason. That bundle of energy, limited energy.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because like obviously I was hoping for such a long time to go and study veterinary medicine at
Yeah.
university. I had all these big ideas. And eventually, when I couldn't, and then I did decide to go to university and study creative writing,
Yeah.
it was at university that I met my husband. So
Oh
it's
wow.
kind of like that, if I hadn't, I mean, would I rather be a vet than be married? I don't know. Jury's still out on that one, but
It's like my mum and the dogs. Like the dogs come first in the pecking order. Like I know where I
oh
sit.
yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. See, the universe must have had like a plan for you if you believe in destiny.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's funny. There's so many paths I guess you can take and so many ways I could have gone down. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm very, very glad that I ended up being able to do something I love day to day and yeah, it's
Oh,
worked
that's
out
brilliant.
okay.
So now I'm going to talk about the present. So I know that you're a journalist and a writer. So do you face like any challenges in regards to work? And also in like previous appointment, have you ever been like discriminated at work because of your disabilities, or are like your current employers less supportive?
So for now I'm self-employed and I've been
Yeah.
self-employed as a freelance journalist for a year and a half, I think, maybe. Before that I was full-time. So when I came out of uni, I worked for a bit of a year and then I got my
Yeah.
kind of dream job on BBC Science Focus magazine.
Oh wow.
Um, which like this was the magazine, like I mentioned it in my uni UCAS application. I was
Yeah.
that like in love with this magazine. So to get the job there was just incredible. And I worked there for nearly 4 years, over four
Yeah.
years. Um, and that was during which time I had my relapse as well. And they were
Yeah.
really good.
Oh, that's
Like
brilliant.
I, for a while I couldn't work at all, and then we did a phased return.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I'm very, very grateful to how supportive they've been. I think it got to the point though where I'd kind of stabilized and I was working about 4 or 5 hours a day, and that it felt
Yeah.
like I wasn't going to be improving from there, at least in any time soon. Um, and I was still in like a assistant position, and I kind
Yeah.
of wanted to, as well as wanting to write the book, I wanted to start taking on a few more bigger pieces
Yeah.
and kind of finding my own way, I guess. So I decided to go freelance. And I think there's pros and cons. Like, it's great in terms of if I'm feeling really bad, or if I know I've got something big coming up
Yeah.
and I have to manage my energy around it, I can limit the amount of commissions I take. I can kind of structure my days and my weeks and stuff around my
Yeah.
energy levels. Um, so the flexibility from that respect
Brilliant.
is really good. I think also though, like the flip side is suddenly if you're unwell and you can't hand in, it's not like you've got, a backup of sick
No.
pay or any, you're not going to get paid at the end of the day if you don't do the work. So it's yeah, it's interesting. It's been fun to learn, I guess, and to get to write for some cool new places and meet lots of people and do that. But also, it's not. I think there's some people who are like really born to freelance and you can
Yeah.
tell they really thrive in it. Whereas I'm just like, this is what I'm doing now, but I can't see myself. I mean, I loved writing the book and
Yeah.
I'm hopefully gonna write another one.
Fingers crossed.
So for now it makes sense to keep in a freelance
Yeah, that
capacity.
makes sense.
But I do miss like being part of a team and having people around you that you speak
Yeah.
to on a daily basis and stuff. So
Yeah, that's understandable. I think there needs to be definitely more support, like especially in regards to sick pay and freelancers. There needs to be more access to it, like for body
mm.
freelance, like because it's essentially like sort of it's going to like I'm going to say demonizing. That's first demonizing like the whole creative industries because I'd say at least a good 80% of the creative industries are freelance, no matter whether we're doing theatre, TV, journalism.
Mm.
So definitely needs more support. But I can definitely understand what you're saying. Like it makes sense to be freelance because then you don't have that pressure from an employer saying, "Oh, like, like penalizing you for being off sick," for example. You just
Mhm.
can just like alter your workload, like you said, with reducing the amount of commissions. So no,
Yeah.
that's good. It's good
And
to. Sorry.
sorry. I was just gonna say, and I get to write about this stuff. Like I'm not kind of being told.
Yeah.
I mean, I do take commissions and stuff
Yeah.
from people have other ideas. But like, on the whole, I get to kind of write about the stuff that I'm really passionate about, and I think that really helps too. I mean, it's not like I know part of your question was, have you faced any discrimination and
Yeah.
stuff? And I think there is that when you do admit to saying I am a disabled person in
Yeah.
a work capacity, I think it comes with often some opinions that people have,
Yeah.
stereotypes and stuff like that.
Definitely.
So, or if I'm out and like sometimes I feel bad if I have to use like my walking stick, or
Yeah.
you feel like, oh, if I go to an interview and I turn up with a stick, are they going to think that I'm less professional or not going to be as good? Or like
Yeah.
there's all these things, almost like I'm preempting the discrimination I'm going to face. So
Yeah. No, I do understand that, like that sort of imposter syndrome, sort of like, but like I for years and years, like I didn't wear like, I mean, to be fair, I didn't know, but I wear like the disability lanyard to work just to let my employees know that I am disabled. For years and years, like I was like wrongly sort of no determined not to accept like any help with my disability. I was fine at school, but then when I moved like into a professional capacity, like I always worried if I accepted help, well, like similar to what you said, will it make me look unprofessional? But as I've got older, I'm like, no, I was born with this disability. If this help is there and I want to use it, I should.
yeah, absolutely.
I just wish I'd learned that a lot earlier in life. So, what would you say are your proudest moments and your biggest achievements? And what positive does uh, your ME and CFS contribute to your life? I don't know why my face is going red, by the way. I'm not playing with the lights. I keep saying that. I've not changed.
It kind of looks like you're in like a disco and
I
something
know.
exciting is happening.
Yeah,
And
I'll
you
turn
go,
my background off. You'll see like a disco ball, like roller skating.
that sounds like so much fun.
It-
Um, Proudest moments, I guess, doing the book has to be one of them because, like that, like I say, is sort of a lifelong dream. So, yeah, I don't know if I ever thought I'd be able to do something like
yeah,
that. And going to uni for me was like an amazing thing too, because for so long I'd written it off as not being able to do it.
yeah,
Um, I think so I had quite a bad relapse right before my wedding, and there was a point where I wasn't sure if I was going to even get through the day. And
yeah,
so to like dance at my wedding was just like really, really lovely, and you know, yeah. But then I guess like small things as well. Like I'm proud of now being able to like forgive myself
yeah,
when I make mistakes and when I do flare up and stuff. Obviously, it's really frustrating and
yeah,
painful and stuff. But yeah, before I think it used to be like I used to worry that that was going to be it and I was going to be so much
yeah,
worse forever and my whole life was going to be ruined. And I feel like I've come to a point now where like having a diagnosis, there's a real grieving process afterwards, isn't
oh,
there?
definitely,
So
100%.
yeah, I think I like that. I think when I thought I was past it, I probably wasn't. Like, it's only, and there's still probably things that I harbor within me that maybe I need to sort of start letting go of. But
Yeah,
yeah, to be at a point where I don't absolutely hate my body is is really nice.
yeah,
Um, and I do think, especially, it came through from writing the book and like interviewing people, like with ME/CFS. I mean, I definitely wouldn't choose to have it, but it
no,
has taught me how important like taking care of yourself is and managing your energy. And like when I see people who are like burning themselves out or thinking, they've got these ideas about expectations and achievements and how they have to be doing X, Y, Z all the time. And I guess I'm glad that I can't, have that
yeah,
the way of living because I know my body wouldn't like it. But also I don't know, being able to manage my energy has taken me so long, but now yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, there's something quite powerful about being
yeah,
able to say, you know
oh,
what?
absolutely.
No, this is what I'm doing. This is my limit, and I'm going to stick to it, and I'm going to feel the best that I can,
Yeah.
reasonably, but through my own choice as well, not because I'm being forced to.
No, I think that's incredibly powerful what you just said. That like, if they understand and like you should be really proud of yourself. Like it's hard to celebrate things that other people take for granted, but celebrating them like it is sort of a part. It takes time. Like I'd say I haven't really started accepting like my autism since probably say 2012 Paralympics. I'd say when I first saw the last leg and saw, oh, look, there's disabled people on TV. They're out there. Maybe having disability isn't so bad. And then even then, a good few years after that, but sort of things like you said, like at your wedding, like being able to dance, like that's a massive thing. Other people just take that for granted. I
Mhm.
think that's absolutely incredible. Like I my mom's always drilled into me, like, don't let your disability define you. Like, similar to you, I now am at a point where I'm accepting things I can't do. But I'm also stubborn that I'm not going to be defined by it. Like, I worked in the ambulance service for a year, taking emergency calls. Like, if you asked a clinical psychologist what someone with autism should do, that's probably number one on their list not to do. But like, I've always been determined to do that, and like, because I don't want to, I want to live my life by not by my rules. That sounds like some kind of rebel, but yeah, I don't want to be defined by someone else. And I think it's like absolutely amazing, and you should be proud of yourself. Like all the amazing things you've done, writing a book, you're a journalist, like you've done so many amazing things. So well done. So you don't need
Thank
my
you.
validation, but I
No,
mean
that's
that
so good to
genuinely.
hear.
Yeah, I
I
mean
do,
that
yeah,
genuinely.
I did need to hear that. And like, it's one of those things that like, I think I've only got to do these things because I've really like had to challenge the expectations of how long it take me to get
Yeah,
there, like how to really slowly crawl towards doing something and like almost like persevering, but also
yeah.
understanding that it's not, I don't have to get there in everybody else's time
No,
frame,
not at all.
so yeah, the pace at which I took to do these things might have been longer than other people, but yeah, thank you for saying that. That's
You're
really
welcome.
lovely.
No, it's about, yeah, your journey is important. Like it's hard not to compare to other people's journey, but your journey is your journey, and you'll get there, but you'll get there when you need to and like in your own time, which is completely fine. The last question, like, what are your wishes for the future? What would you like to achieve? It's quite long. What would you like to achieve? And do you think anything needs to change to support you and other people with disabilities?
So I kind of, I guess, my wish for the future for both disabled people and non-disabled people is that we start like taking our energy levels a bit more seriously. Whatever whether it is a condition or burnout or just like the fact that life is so unbelievably exhausting at the moment, to for people to start, instead of being focused on like optimizing and productivity hacks and
Yeah,
like do more, do more, do more. It'd be great if we all kind of collectively just learned actually it's okay to go a bit slow. It's okay to take care of ourselves and not rush towards these things.
yeah,
That was kind of like one of the hopes and dreams I guess I had. Personally, I think I'm still finding my way in what next. Like for so
yeah.
long, it was like that's the one thing I'm focused on, and now it's happened. I'm like, well, what is my purpose now? So my personal hope would be to kind of figure out what post book publication Amy looks like. In terms of like support for me and for other people with disabilities, I think I see a lot of great stuff happening, great conversations happening,
Yeah,
especially like there's some great social media communities and influencers and stuff who are sharing their stories. And I think that's really great. But I think a lot of the people who are sharing these stories and educating are educating like people who are already members of our community.
yeah,
And while that's completely valid and important, I
yeah,
think we need to also help people who aren't, you know, like us understand what it's actually like.
absolutely.
Um, because you go out and you still face the stigma from people who don't get it, and I don't know how we do that.
No,
Obviously the algorithms, we find the people that are like us and have the same views of us and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see like more mainstream media places taking up stories like we've had, like a kind of spark on BBC
oh, I
iPlayer.
love that. Elma Nichols, my
Yeah.
favorite
Oh, she's
author.
great, isn't
She's
she?
amazing.
Oh my goodness. And like then when there was a big thing with like Dragon's Den and
Yeah,
Emmy and that
yeah,
was in the news and people were talking about it and so these things, I think we're slowly getting to a
yeah,
point where
yeah.
this is happening. But yeah, I'm just hopeful that they'll continue.
Oh, I think they're all brilliant goals, and I hope that one day, like on a wider scale, it does change. And like, I'm sure you'll find in time that you will find like uh, your next part of your journey. But it's been absolutely lovely speaking to you. It's been really interesting. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, James, for having me on. I really enjoyed
Thank
our
you.
chat.
Oh, thank you.